Every day we breathe an average of 23,000 times. We categorise and respond to an amazing array of different odours, yet we hardly even notice. In fact, many of us would rather lose our sense of smell than our access to technology.
Oh, okay, that's not an easy question, actually. Because access to technology means access to everything.
That's really hard for me.
Probably my smell, I guess, yeah.
Access to technology.
I prefer smell.
Imagine there's a fire, you know?
Smell.
Smell?
I need my phone.
If you can't smell the smoke, you might die, you know?
Yeah.
I don't want to die.
I'm not so sure I could do without my smartphone or laptop either. But do we really know what we're giving up when we lose our sense of smell?
I mean, chili is actually quite tricky. You will get the chemical reaction of it, but you don't have the warnings.
Chemicals control us. They influence us. Changes everything there is about us, and we just ignore it.
From enchanting odours, white and black pepper,
Absolutely, and just a hint of eucalyptus.
to cheating plants,
These orchids lie.
join me as I find out how to improve and treasure our most underrated sense.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's little wonder us humans don't pay much attention to smell. With the sunlight dazzling my eyes and the swans making a racket, for me, it's an audio-visual morning. But Eddie is obsessed with a symphony of odours I can't even fathom.
Eddie, come on.
Like little chimneys all around us. Each animal, each blade of grass, each rotting pile of organic matter is pumping out its own chemical signature to be carried through the air and into Eddie's quivering nostrils. But if he's excited now, just wait till he gets around this corner.
Ready? Go!
I'm a dog. I'm a dog. I'm a dog. I'm a dog.
Among the canines here in Centennial Park is a man equally intrigued by smell. Professor Paul Moore has journeyed all the way from Detroit to instill in me a wonder for our most underestimated sense.
We've created a world that tends to not focus on it. It's very subtle and it's very hidden, and it influences our behavior a lot, but we just ignore it.
I mean, I wish for a second that I could smell what they're smelling.
They're sniffing and say, oh, I played with you last week. You're a good dog to play with. Or I'd smell you from last week. You were a little mean, so I'm not going to play with you. They're going to pick up their dominant status, their social status, their reproductive status, what they've eaten. All that kind of stuff that you and I would share in a conversation with words, they share with chemical signals. Their whole world's sense of smell.
A dog's sense of smell is so powerful, it can pick up a scent in 1 part per trillion. It's this extraordinary sensitivity that's being used to train dogs as cancer screeners.
Some of these samples will be from people that are diseased, some of them will be from healthy individuals, and one will contain a cancer.
Lucy has learnt to sniff out bladder, kidney and prostate cancer and gets it right 95% of the time. So why is it they detect smell so much better?
They have an olfactory bulb that's much bigger and more efficient than ours.
So more of their brain is dedicated to deciphering the smell.
We have such a small nose, we can bring in a little volume of air about here, but they can have such a large nose, like they got to sample large volumes so they can get all this information.
They sniff many more times a second, and the inside of their nose is a lot more intricate, although it works much the same as our nose. If I were a scent molecule entering a nostril, I would encounter a maze of tiny bones called turbinates. Which dramatically increase the surface area inside the nasal passage. A top layer of mucus humidifies the air, dissolving odour molecules and allowing the smell receptors beneath to pick them up. A dog has up to 300 million of these receptor nerve cells, and we have about 5 million. But our smell is still a lot more powerful than you might think.
Take a smell of this and see if you can figure out what that is.
Oh, poor. That's smelly cheese.
Yeah.
That's one of my favourite smells.
Cheese is good, isn't it?
So does that mean we have a receptor in our nose that's just for smelly cheese?
No. The cheese that you smell is a combination of odors, a combination of keys that are opening up different locks in our nose.
So I imagine that would allow us to pick up just millions of different smells then,
Yeah.
different combinations.
Well, the new estimate now is we can actually smell 1 trillion different types of odors.
For instance, there's more than 100 different volatile chemicals involved in the odour of cheddar cheese, like ethanoic acid that produces a sharp smell, and butyric acid giving the whiff of sweaty socks. Whatever mix of stinky chemicals are in Swiss raclette, me and Eddie love it.
Good boy, Eddie.
But what about those subtle smells we're not aware of? Although a dog's greeting might seem distinctly unappealing, our formalities might not be as far removed as we imagine. After secretly filming 271 people in a greeting event, neurobiologists at the Weizmann Institute in Israel have suggested handshakes may be our way of sniffing each other out.
The experimenter enters the room and shakes their hand. This is a clear sampling behavior. Once again, greet, sample, greet. Experimenter has left the room already, sample.
Subjects sniffed their hand on average twice as many times after a handshake than they did before.
The experimenter now leaves the room and the subject samples right away. We will now return to this image, highlighting in green the pronounced sniff concurrent with bringing the hand to the nose.
Chemical analysis showed a handshake alone is enough to transfer odour. The chemicals transferred are similar to those animals smell when sniffing each other.
The chemical senses, I call them ninjas. They're hidden. So they go into our brain and we're not aware of it, we're not conscious of it. So it makes us respond emotionally, respond physiologically before we actually think about the response. So it's very subtle and it's very hidden.
The idea that chemosignaling occurs in humans is hotly contested, but several intriguing studies suggest it might happen. For instance, in a T-shirt sniff study, women's testosterone levels changed in response to the scent of another woman, depending on where that woman was in her monthly cycle.
Testosterone is tied very much to social dominance and in competitiveness and aggression, and upregulating or downregulating testosterone through chemical signals could change your competitiveness.
In nature, chemosignaling is critical to survival.
Signals are all around us. They don't realize it, but these plants are talking to each other. When some plant over here gets attacked by an insect, it releases an airborne chemical that floats all around, and these other trees kind of smell it in their way, and then they produce toxins so these insects don't come and eat their leaves.
So they're actually warning each other, their neighbours, about insect attacks?
Yeah.
Even birds have been shown to pick up this smell and help ward off the insect attack by eating the invaders. It's a chemical interaction that's evolved over millions of years, just like many other odorous forms of communication between plants and animals. We tend to think of the wonderful aromas of flowers as existing just for our pleasure. But as their shapes, colours and sizes show endless diversity, so do their scents, and they're not aimed at us.
Do you know, the most beautiful colors don't have the most beautiful fragrances.
Really?
It's the dull, the white, and the kind of the ugly ducklings of the flower world. They have the most fragrance because they need that to draw in the insects. They don't have the colors. They use the aroma to bring them in.
Well, that's interesting. So we should buy dull flowers if we want the room to smell nice.
Of more than 1,700 chemicals that make up the diversity of floral scents, linalool is one of the most famous. This sweet fragrance is not only attractive to insects, it's also used in the majority of our perfumes, soaps and detergents. Interestingly, the same chemical has been shown to reduce stress in lab rats, changing gene activity and blood chemistry.
When we talk about words and lying and deception, orchids lie. So what they do is they have a bee pheromone and they bring bees in to pollinate these flowers, and the bees come in thinking there's a female bee there, but they're being completely deceived.
It's not this species of orchid, but orchids like Ophrys arachnitiformis that emit a scent that gets bees so excited they try to mate with the flower and end up pollinating it instead.
So all the flowers we see here, all the different shapes and sizes release chemicals, and they're advertising to the different animals that are pollinating.
So they're basically all saying the same thing, come and get me, but in a different language.
Yes, and that language is aimed to the customer. So we have bats, possums, moths, bees, rodents, all coming in, and these flowers have tuned the chemicals to those customers.
The complexities of scent and its detection are so evolved, it's proved a remarkably difficult sense to copy.
As you can see on your TV set, in a sophisticated panel of red, green and blue pixels, humans have done a marvellous job at imitating vision. We've also managed to faithfully reproduce sound. But can anyone mimic smell?
Here at the CSIRO, they're getting remarkably close. This is what they call cybernose.
It's probably one of the hardest senses of all to mimic in a machine. The latest idea is that humans, who don't have a lot of receptors, have 400 different channels in which they measure smell. So I think that multidimensionality is a real issue. I think the other one is that it's a much more nebulous sense in that being able to link the chemistry to the perception and describe that perception is really hard.
Although it's taken a lot of trial and error over a decade, CSIRO has developed their odour detector by stealing the smell toolkits from worms.
The smell receptors in the nematode, just like our noses, are proteins. So we can clone out the genes for those and then make the proteins in yeast. The first step is to find which receptor does what. What's the match between the receptor and the chemical, the smell? And the second step is then to engineer that into a functioning receptor that can actually talk to a machine.
So far, they've made 15 matches between odour molecules and their receptors. A DNA sequence is edited into those receptor proteins that makes them glow and change colour when the chemical of interest is present.
And we can measure that change. And that tells us not only that the right chemical, the target chemical, bound, it also tells us how much of it is present.
Just like in a nose, the odour molecules need to be dissolved in water before the receptors in the machine can pick them up. Cybernose is now at the point where it can detect an odour at 1 part per trillion. That's as sensitive as a dog.
The one we kicked off with was looking for explosives, so looking for the vapours that sit above explosives or precursors of explosives. The one that excites us most of all is breath diagnosis of disease. So we have found, for example, that there are specific chemicals in the breath of people who've got the very earliest stages of malaria, before they even know they've got malaria. And so one of the dreams, if you like, is to be able to diagnose a range of diseases using the smell on people's breath or their skin.
One of the reasons that smell is a lot more complicated is vision and audition lies along a spectrum. Right? We have low-frequency sounds and high-frequency sounds. We have red light and we have violet light based on a spectrum. There's no spectrum for odors. It's this three-dimensional, or actually more than three-dimensional kind of array of odors that don't make sense. So I can take a compound and make it larger and larger, but it's going to smell different. And we don't understand how changing the molecular structure changes our perception.
perception is not just information-based, it's tainted with emotion. The feeling I get when I smell a flower is unmistakably a good one. The interesting thing is, most of us hate or like smells from the moment we're born.
When a baby is born, we also know that it can actually perceive a range of odors, and the measure of response at the moment has been purely on facial expressions.
Here at Sydney Children's Hospital, researchers are honing in on the 4 facial muscles used by babies when they smell something pleasant or unpleasant, like sweet vanilla or pungent fish.
There is the eyebrows going up, perhaps, as one measure, and also a partial smile where there is movement in the cheeks, etc. Unpleasant smells, well, you get a dropping of the jaw into this, or the eyebrow, the squinting of the eyes, and other movements in the face that's indicating that the child doesn't like that smell.
David is developing an objective clinical test for smell function by measuring the electrical signals generated by specific muscles.
If they have any dysfunction in smelling, at the moment we have no proper measure of that. Well, the bonding of a mother with a child is partly dependent on the odours from the breast, which is a major part of the child's life early on.
Smell dysfunction can not only cause bonding and feeding difficulties, it can indicate another serious problem.
It could be due to changes in the nose that need to be made in terms of it has a bent septum, for example. Or it may be something indicating there's something more central. It could be a tumour pressing on a nerve, for example.
The reason behavioural and mental responses to odour appear more instinctive than other senses like vision and hearing is to do with where they're directed in our brain.
Smell does go to the input from the nose to the forebrain, and after that it goes to centres which are dealing with reproduction, emotion, with memory. And so it's as they say, they do call it an ancient sense.
Some people call this the lizard brain. It's the lower part of the brain, and it activates very primal circuits in our brains that have been with us since we were fish or lizards.
It's also why almost everyone has responses to different smells that trigger distant memories. Nothing transports me back to my early years quite like the warm, earthy smell of a horse's hide.
As soon as you trigger those olfactory memories, you're just taken back to your childhood. You know, for me, smell of bread. I'm taken back to this cabin up in Minnesota, United States, and when I'm 14, I got a shaggy dog, and I have a sauna, and I'm sitting there. That's that memory, and I can't stop it from happening.
There is nothing quite like the smell of freshly baked bread. And this morning there's a heady mix of warm dough and spices that can be smelt from quite a distance. It leads us down the path to one of the most important evolutionary purposes of smell.
It smells so good.
Yeah.
This is just out of the oven.
To give us information about what we're eating.
How's the cake? What do you taste?
So good. I taste cream cheese and, well, flour and it's sweet. Raspberry or strawberry, raspberry, I think.
Take your next bite, but plug your nose and see what you taste.
Sweet and cold. No raspberries.
No raspberries.
No raspberries.
So they're gone because those are odors. When you plug your nose, you miss all that. So a lot of what we perceive as flavor when we eat food is smells.
So what can we taste with our taste buds?
There's basically 5: salt, sweet, bitter, sour, and a savory type of flavor. But we don't get all the complex odors that we get when we use our nose.
Without my sense of smell, all the delicacy and joy of this food, all the hard work of the bakers and pastry makers would be completely lost.
It goes up back through the mouth. And if you block your nose and you block air transport from your mouth up, then there's no flavor.
Oh, that's amazing.
To demonstrate this for yourself, try to decipher the flavours of jelly beans without your nose.
Any flavour?
So far.
Maybe sourish?
I got like a sweetness, but I don't know the flavour.
Okay, now let go of your nose.
Popcorn.
Excellent.
Like there is, but I can't tell.
Okay, now let go of your nose.
Can't tell the flavour, it's a lot stronger.
Before that, I could just taste the sweet and sour.
Right.
But now I could taste it's fruity.
That medicine flavour that Starburst has.
Oh, yeah, it's apple. It's apple, definitely, yeah. A green apple. Definitely got the fruit flavour. And definitely stronger and sweeter when my nose was unblocked.
Cherry.
For us, momentarily losing our smell is an amusing joke. But for those people that lose their sense of smell permanently, life can start to lose its flavour. The condition is called anosmia. Anna Barnes lost her sense of smell 5 years ago in a mugging in Cambodia.
I had a bad hit to the head, so I was kind of recovering from that. And then about a week afterwards, I thought, hold on, something's not quite right here. It became very clear to me when I was well enough to go outside that I lost my smell, because back then the sewerage was open sewerage. So I lost my appetite for the first, I would say, 4 months. I was kind of retraining myself to remember, oh no, you have to eat.
A vegetarian, suddenly Anna went from being a big fan of fruit to loathing it.
When I lost my taste, fruit tasted, for me, terrible. It's just gross. Fruit just tastes really slimy. It's all about texture. But vegetables were really good. And so on the upside, I became a far better vegetarian. I also had like some early kind of, mix-ups of accidentally drinking vodka, thinking it was water, and, all the kind of stereotypical things that I guess people worry about.
Some people become severely depressed from losing their taste associated with smell. Anna is coping relatively well.
I love the smell of rain. I mean, I'm a Melbourne girl, so that kind of stuff was what I immediately realised I would miss. And I started, worrying about memory, because I used different oils to study and stuff. So I was one of those people who was very into smell. So that quite upset me. That was probably the most kind of bratty, dramatic thing I did when I first lost my taste smell, was I broke my favourite perfume. I was like, oh. I think not being able to smell gas and kind of dangerous things is definitely the one thing that really scares me. And also you eat a lot of off food without realising. I've vomited from having off milk many times. I mean, chili is actually quite tricky. You will get the chemical reaction of it, but you don't have the warnings.
People with anosmia can really get depressed because a lot of the things that they enjoy, mealtime, it's gone, it's missing.
Smell is clearly important, but I've never felt I have a particularly good sense of it.
I don't know.
It's events like these I feel particularly intimidated by my lack of sensory sophistication.
It's a really rich honey nose, nice buttery flavours.
Especially in front of Dr. Alex Russell, whose PhD thesis looked at how people describe the odours and flavours of wine.
So what are you smelling?
Well, with this one, I'm getting these beautiful, dewy, vibrant red fruits up the top of it. Some lovely white and black pepper through. And
White and black pepper?
Absolutely, and just a hint of eucalyptus.
I pretty much just smell wine. I'm not sure if I'm born with a lousy nose or...
No, absolutely not. So it seems that wine experts have exactly the same sensory abilities as novices. They smell the same things. They just know what to do with the information. It's more about, if you think of this wine here, there's a good few hundred or maybe even 1,000 or so odours going up your nose right now. And it's more about knowing which ones to pay attention to and which ones to ignore.
So when you say peppery, I mean, this is the confusing bit to me. There's no actual pepper in this wine. So where does that come from?
So pepper's a really great example with this wine. There's no pepper added, but there is a chemical in there called rotundone, which is the same chemical which is in white and black pepper.
A researcher in America called Anne Noble famously created a wine aroma wheel. She developed standards for adding easily accessible foods to wine to help people understand how to pick up their aromas, like raspberries in red wine or citrus in white.
So people could smell them and learn what that smells like in a wine context. But it's years and years of training. You're not going to become an expert overnight.
When you think about it, it's hard to know what capsicum or citrus fruit smells like in white wine, or berries and nutmeg in red wine, unless you've come across that smell before. But what makes it even more confusing is the same chemical can smell completely different as its concentrations change.
There's this chemical called formicaptophenylpentanone. We call it 4-MMP for short, which is found in a number of different grapes, but two great ones that we're all familiar with are Cabernet Sauvignon and Sauvignon Blanc. So in Cabernet Sauvignon, it tends to smell like blackcurrant, and in Sauvignon Blanc, it tends to smell more like box tree sort of aromas. But with that chemical, if you get a much higher concentration, it actually smells like cat's wee.
I'm not about to add that to my wine to see if I can pick it up. I've decided I'll just enjoy the wine without being able to name its flavours.
When you think about the power of smell, it really is through the subliminal, isn't it? It's because we underestimate it that it's so powerful.
Yeah. Every day we're exposed to these chemicals, and we're not aware of how they make us happy or sad or make judgments on people, whether they're competent. And it's almost like these chemicals are getting inside of our head, and it's mind control.
Yeah, we're influenced by smell every day and we don't know it.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving me a new appreciation.
You're welcome.